Hello, and welcome to another episode of Hacking with Friends. My name is Kody Kinsey. I am a security researcher at Varonis, and my co-host today is Michael, a crypto specialist. And as hackers know, crypto means cryptozoology. So Michael, how's the search for Bigfoot going?
It's going quite well. We found him in a local nearby forest. And in fact, I found him eating a Raspberry Pi.
Wow.
Which is why we're going to be talking about Raspberry Pis today and awesome projects you can do with them, including the Pi hole.
Very clever transition, Michael. I didn't really think you could come back from the Bigfoot thing, but there you go. So yes, we are talking about Raspberry Pis today. And in fact, this is a project that we've wanted to do for quite some time, but we have always been working for people that are supported by ads.
Yeah.
So this is not a project we've ever been able to show anyone before because every time we propose it, they're like, wait, so this blocks ads. And they're like, yeah.
Among other things, right?
Yeah.
Like that. So the prime way it's advertised is as an ad blocker. But really the point I want to drive across today is the fact that it is a DNS level sinkhole. So that means, yeah, sure, you can use it to block ads, but you can use it to block anything. So you can use it as a sort of firewall that works on the DNS level, and it can block malicious websites. And more importantly, even if your devices do get compromised, if you have a good block list, then you can prevent them from becoming part of a botnet by blocking those command servers and stuff like that. So that's like the real gist of what we're going to be doing today.
Right, so the name of this project, and I'm sure a lot of people have heard of it, is...
Pi hole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is a project that allows you to take some control over what's going on your network. And, you know, there are things you can do on your computer, like setting up a firewall on your computer, like I think like Lulu or Little Snitch or something like that, that allows you to know when a program is maybe phoning a service that you don't want it to, or a suspicious service is trying to phone home. But if you have a program, maybe... something that's a little bit more nefarious that gets missed, if you don't have one of those, or if maybe an IoT device gets infected that couldn't have its own firewall, then this is a way for you to be able to prevent it from, as Michael said, becoming part of a botnet by contacting its command and control server and getting a bunch of malicious instructions to do bad stuff. And of course, there's also the benefit of restricting different websites you don't want to load, such as advertisers, trackers, and the kind of people who really want to be able to load cookies and all sorts of other stuff to track you across the internet.
And you touched on a really important note there. And that is, most people are familiar with ad blockers and stuff like that work in the browser. And essentially, the browser operates as normal, and it just doesn't render the code that it sees as an ad. What's important about the Pi hole is since it works on the DNS level, it means it can work on any device, including IoT devices. So things like smart TVs, which will have built-in ads in them. Very, very difficult to try to use AdBlocker Plus or some, Chrome plugin to block those ads, right? And additionally, as I was talking about with botnets, a lot of people forget that most botnets are things like home routers and DVRs and stuff like that. And so by blocking the DNS level, you can prevent all of those, because essentially the way this works is, if you're not familiar with what DNS is to begin with, it's like the address book for the internet, right? You want to go to google.com, but the computer's like, oh, I don't know where to find google.com. So it goes to DNS, and it's like, okay, where's google.com?
Which IP address is Google.com
exactly
located at, right?
And so it gives it back an IP address, and then it's like, oh, I know where to find that. So the way this will work is your DNS request would normally go to your router, and then your router will forward it to a DNS provider upstream. Normally, that's going to be your internet service provider. But if you change that, then you might have someone like Cloudflare or Google providing your DNS services. And essentially what they're able to do is, because so many people are requesting so many different things, they're able to have massive DNS caches, and it makes it faster for them to respond. Yeah. So what we're doing is we're going to go to your router and tell your router, okay, no, use this local IP address as your DNS provider, and that's going to be the Pi hole. So the Pi hole then takes that DNS request, and it's going to compare it to your blacklist and see, okay, is this website on the blacklist? No. Then it's going to either send it to its upstream DNS provider, whichever you designate, or you can make it what's called a recursive DNS server, which means it'll actually do the lookup process.
And
so
then cache it too?
Right. So it can say, like, okay, where are the IP addresses for .com domains? Okay, now, like, this Google domain, where, I don't remember the exact entire recursive process, but there's like 7 or 8 steps there.
Cool. So, and the point then being you have a local DNS server that you trust and you can configure exactly the way that it works.
Yeah.
Can you use this maliciously? Like, could you use it to, for example, like reroute people or like otherwise just rewrite DNS rules?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I do imagine that you could designate a certain IP address. Like so one of the things is Pi-hole is really like pretty GUI interface on the web and stuff. I don't know if through that you would be able to do that, but certainly if you went into the Pi and just changed around some stuff, you could say, okay, you could just basically you could poison the cache. So yeah, any DNS cache poisoning you could think of, if you had access to the Pi and you had the permissions, you could go in there and poison that cache.
Yeah, I mean, even something like just let's say that somebody sets this up, but they like don't change any of the default credentials. They just leave it open, and then this becomes a security problem because they just want to block ads. But I want to go in and change their DNS server to some malicious one that I have somewhere on the internet.
Yeah, you could. It would be actually so if you were hosting your own upstream DNS provider on the internet somewhere, then certainly. It would be like a single line just to change what upstream provider you're using.
And then I could see every single website that they're looking up, and I could even change the results that they get back.
Yeah, and so one of the...
So change the password.
no, that's one of the first steps we'll do. And I've been saying the Raspberry Pi, but this actually can run on like any Linux system. It can even be a Docker container if you want. However, I'm not super fluent with Docker. So I like a Raspberry Pi because a Raspberry Pi is really low power and easy to leave running somewheres. In fact, you can the cheapest Raspberry Pi, that $5 Raspberry Pi Zero, is ostensibly like the best because it's cheapest and lowest power. However, the one thing I caution people against with using that is that it would be connected via Wi-Fi. So if Kody or someone like that came along with the deauthor, then they could
deauthor.
Oh,
you mean the Pi Zero W for $10?
Yeah.
I just think that's funny because you've corrected me like 3 times about
that. Okay, well, yeah. So yes, the Raspberry Pi Zero, if you were going to use that, I would recommend an Ethernet dongle because basically you don't want someone just like deauthing.
Yeah, there's like a watch like around here somewhere that I could just be like boop, and then like suddenly your DNS, your special little DNS server is like kicked off the internet.
Yeah, so it just makes your internet more vulnerable. When you do it that way.
This little watch right here could end that whole scheme if you're doing this over Wi-Fi. So never have a critical security component like a DNS server that's providing like blacklisting for malicious devices. Connected via Wi-Fi. If I'm a hacker and I'm going after you specifically, and I just noticed that you happen to be doing that, all I have to do is like turn on this little watch made by Stefan and press the button, and it's going to make it so that doesn't connect to the internet, or it doesn't connect to your network anymore, and it just doesn't work. So,
right. Yeah. So you can use any of the Raspberry Pis, the standard Raspberry Pis. Here I have a 4. I'm actually going to be running this on a 3. Honestly, like a 3 is good enough. Like I wouldn't go out and buy a new Raspberry Pi for this. I recommend using this specifically for Pi-hole and nothing else, just so you don't introduce more opportunity for failures. And that being the case, it requires like no power. Like it uses very little CPU. So you could even, if you had like a Raspberry Pi 2 somewhere, like use that.
I know the Ethernet speed on the new Raspberry Pi is substantially faster. Is there enough data being put through this that would be necessary, or you would see some sort of like speed improvement?
I mean, yes, if you were going to use the gigabit Ethernet, so I think that's on, is that the 3 or the 4? The 4 that started on. Then that's fine. But honestly, this is local. As far as like the amount of data, no, you don't need that at all. Right. Maybe it might help with the speed a little, but we're talking like fractions of a millisecond for how far this is going.
Right. It's important also to, like, for non-technical people, it's important to differentiate like DNS. Like routing DNS through the Raspberry Pi versus routing everything through the Raspberry Pi. If I was doing like full on like ARP spoofing, like everything else where all traffic was flowing through the Raspberry Pi, suddenly that the Ethernet connection speed like really matters because all the traffic is flowing through. We're not talking about this. This is a DNS sinkhole, meaning like only requests that are like, hey, where's this website, are going to be routed to this thing, and all the content, everything else is going to be going through the normal internet connection. So that's why like the speed of the Ethernet connection probably doesn't matter.
Like if you had a DNS request that was like more than a megabyte, that would be alarming. Like that's someone like exfiltrating stuff via DNS. So I'm gonna actually switch over to my screen. Cool. And so one cool addition thing you can look at if you do get into this is Adafruit has these kits. Basically, they're just a screen that can go on your Pi hole. This one doesn't include the Pi, but it's really cool because you can have this in your network closet, and you can use it to be monitoring what's going on with your DNS requests, which is pretty nice.
By the way, if Adafruit's watching or anyone knows Adafruit, tell them hi because we love them and we would love to do content with them.
But okay, so we covered basically what you need. You need the Raspberry Pi. You're going to need a power adapter for that Raspberry Pi, and then you're going to need an Ethernet cable. Honestly, you can cheat a little if you want to. What I usually do is I use an Ethernet cable, and then I only use the micro USB to USB cable, and I just plug it into my router, because a lot of routers will have a USB port on the back of them, so you can use that to actually power the Raspberry Pi. It's not going to draw enough power. The only concern with that is if your router crashes, then your DNS is going to go down, but like that doesn't really matter anyway. So in theory, they should boot up together.
Yeah, one thing I would note is sometimes that doesn't work, and when you can tell that something is wrong, you'll see like a little lightning bolt symbol on like the top corner of the Raspberry Pi screen, which is like an underpower symbol. I never knew what this meant. I was always like, wow, lightning's coming. Like, it's amazing. It has these sensors. But like after looking it up, it just means that like it's not getting enough power.
It's browning out.
It's browning out, yeah. So like if you're getting network issues and you're having problems and it's plugged into your router, sometimes it just doesn't get enough power, and that's what that lightning bolt means.
Yeah. Okay. So as I said, Raspberry Pi. Really, any Raspberry Pi operating system will work as long as it's Linux based. Raspberry Pi OS is what I did.
I now recommend Debian. Oh, wait, no, I'm sorry, I'm lying. Ubuntu.
Ubuntu, yeah.
Sorry.
I think you have to have the 64-bit version.
Yes, which means that you need to have the newest Raspberry Pi. You need to have the Raspberry Pi 4. And it can't be the lowest amount of RAM. It has to be like the medium or like the top tier. I don't remember what the sizes are, but I just remember you have to have like one of the nicer, newer Raspberry Pis to do it. But it is a really nice operating system to be running on a Raspberry Pi.
Yeah. And anyway, so once you have that, then you just need to open up a program like Etcher. Etcher is my favorite for flashing software like this. So essentially, you'll select the image you just downloaded, and then you will flash that over. But this is a baking show. I already have one pre-baked in the oven, so I'll skip that step. One thing that is important to do is, as Kody alluded to, and I showed with the Adafruit, you can attach a screen. However, like the way I like to work with my Pi hole is just via SSH. So if you're doing Raspberry Pi OS, then you'll just need to unplug it and plug it back in, and then you should be able to go to boot. And there, you're going to need to add a file that is just blank with SSH, because by default SSH is disabled, and that'll enable it.
Oh, by just adding a file. Okay.
Yeah, so it's a blank text file with no file extension. It's just SSH. I kind of cheat on Mac on creating that. I just like find like a short text file, and then I just duplicate it because I don't know a better way to do this, and then I will open it. And
the only way I would do it is just a terminal.
Yeah, terminal
just
works too.
Yeah.
But if you're more familiar with like doing this sort of thing, then you do that, and then you can just rename it.
That's very gooey, Michael.
Yeah. Also, the same thing on Windows. You can just make a blank text file, and then, but you'll need to have the little thing clicked so that you can see file extensions, and then you'll need to edit the file extension.
That's a neat trick. I like that.
But then once you've done that, then you put your micro SD card in, and ta-da, you got a Raspberry Pi. So I've already SSH'd into mine, you'll need to find the IP address. I usually recommend Fing. It's an app you can get on your phone. That's the best way.
Failing that, Macs, once they have Homebrew installed, I believe, can easily install ARP-Scan, which is absolutely the easiest way to do this. Do you have ARP-Scan installed? Just type ARP-scan, ARP.
I think I need to exit the SSH connection, right?
Oh, yeah.
Whoa.
Oh, it's frozen. That's hilarious.
That's stupid. Okay, so I'll just terminate that. Okay.
Command +++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++++
Oh, dash scan.
Command not found.
Yeah.
Type brew, BREW, space, install, and then just ARP scan again. You can just copy and paste it too. Or, yeah, Brave. Yeah, so if you do need a good network scanner on Mac OS, if you're on Mac OS like Michael, Homebrew is the way to be able to download and run Linux-like programs and make these sorts of tasks really easy. One of the hardest things for me as a beginner was finding stuff on the network I'm connected to. And using Nmap can be kind of hard for people that don't understand like
it's
what
updating Homebrew.
Oh yeah, it always does that. It
Okay.
needs to fetch the packages. You don't need to. You can just Command Shift N and make it like a new terminal. You don't need to let it delay you.
Okay.
But yeah, so like for me, I had a really hard time working with like Nmap, for example, because it requires a lot of arguments and you need to know like how to calculate a network range, for example.
Yeah.
But with ARP scan, it's literally ARP-scan and then do a space.
Oh, ARP dash scan and then space.
Space dash L.
Dash
And you're probably going to need to go back and sudo exclamation. Sudo? Sudo
And
exclamation,
then,
exclamation.
like that?
No, exclamation point. Those are quotes.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And put in your little password. Oh, it's nice and long.
Wait, yeah.
That wasn't your password.
Wait, what? Yeah.
All right. Well, no need to
Yeah.
get hung up on that if you
Command C. No, I'm typing it in right, but
don't.
anyway.
Control C.
Control C?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway.
Sudo. Incorrect password attempts. This will be reported.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's how you can install a very simple network scanner onto a macOS system so you can find this thing if you don't know how to calculate a network range.
Yeah. But then you can do SSH. And then I already looked this up, but I forgot.
Maybe you should run the network scanner. What is your password? Do you have caps lock on?
Yeah, there we go.
Ugh.
And then when you're connecting to the Raspberry Pi OS for the first time, SSH password is Raspberry. So Pi is the username, and then anyway, okay. So now we've connected to it. I made this look way more complicated than it actually is. Really easy. And then so there's two ways to install Pi-hole. There's the manual way, and then there's the lazy way, which is a curl command. So normally you would be cautious about running a curl command because it could be running like any arbitrary code and downloading anything. But you can always go to the Pi-hole GitHub repository and check out the code yourself if you don't trust that. I'm lazy and trustful, so I'm just going to copy the curl command. And then should make this bigger. Then
While that's running, could you... oh, it's beautiful. Never mind.
yeah. Oh, no, it'll be much more beautiful because this will actually walk us through the majority of the setup process. So it'll take a second.
Can you switch over for a second while that's running before it asks for anything? So I just wanted to show, if you do know your password, then this is what it looks like to do a simple scan. The Raspberry Pi Foundation is what we're looking for. So in this case, it's as simple as that to find out what the IP address is. So it's a very, very, very simple way of doing a scan. All right, back to you.
Yeah, I think I was just typing in my password.
Yes, I know. It was driving me
Well,
crazy.
it's not my password. It's this production laptop's password, which I hate.
Okay. All right.
Okay, but I will go back to my screen. So it doesn't take very long, and soon we should see what looks like a scary blue screen, but in fact is not scary at all. It'll be the setup page. Something else you might want to do, if you are installing like an older version, or have an older Pi, then you're going to want to do sudo apt-get upgrade, update and upgrade. So that's something I already did on this Pi beforehand. But yes, here's the scary blue screen. But okay, so we're going to use spacebar and arrow keys.
This will metamorphosize your puny device into a mighty network-wide ad stopper.
Yeah, and of course, they got to beg for the donations because it is an open source project.
Wait, just show it for a second, right?
Oh, yeah.
No, it's fine, whatever.
Okay.
I was just going to say, they built the damn thing. You might as well show people where to send their money if they want to. All right.
Yeah, so we need to set a static IP address. Why that's important is because if this was using a dynamic IP address and, it reassigns a new IP address.
What is it?
Okay, if the router, the DHCP server, issues a new IP address to this Pi, and we point all the DNS queries to that old IP address, then it's going to break the entire internet, and you won't be able to go to anything. So that's why that's important to assign a static IP address.
Yeah, just remember every time you connect to a Wi-Fi network, it'll just assign you whatever IP address happens to be open. But if somebody else jumps in while you're away and gets that IP address, it'll just assign you the next available one. So your IP address on a local network will change all the time. And that will absolutely break this project if you don't make sure that the Raspberry Pi stays put on the same IP address so we can point all the DNS traffic to it without the risk of losing everything.
Right. Okay, so this is what I was saying, the upstream. So by default, it doesn't do a recursive DNS server because while a recursive DNS server is great for security, your roommates or anyone that cares about speed will execute you for using it because it will take a minute or 2 minutes the first time you load any website and the first time you load any website after a couple of days. So that's, Google is able to get around this by... They have millions of users doing these requests. So when they do that once, then they're able to cache that response and then issue the cached response, which is much faster. So that's why we're going to use one of those upstream providers. People have problems with Google sometimes because, one of the things you might be trying to avoid by using a Pi-hole is tracking. So do I really want to send all my DNS queries through Google?
Probably
Maybe not. So there are some various projects you can look into, such as OpenDNS, DNS Watch. I've heard good things about Quad 9. I personally like Cloudflare, and that's because of something else we're going to do later on, if we have the time. So I'm just going to, select that. And then we have the option of selecting the block list. So these are the default list of DNS queries that it's automatically going to block, right? By default, this should be a good starting place. We'll show you how to add your own block lists and where to get those in just a second. Oh no, yeah. Turn. Okay. And if you want to support IPv6, that's the future of things. So yes. You can just basically your way through.
Wait, can you do both?
Yeah, that's
okay. Good.
That's what I just did. So you usually want to support both, right? Because IPv4 is what we're using right now, and that's what most people. That's the default. And then IPv6 is the newer generation of things. So this is something. If you don't remember it, just write it down. The local address. So the gateway is just talking about your router, right? But then the IP address of 100 is basically what I need to remember here. That's fine. So basically just warning us about IP conflicts. So make sure that you don't have another device statically assigned to this IP address.
Yeah, the concern here is if you don't have your router set to reserve this IP address, then you could leave. Someone could take the IP address, and then you're for whatever reason, if the DNS server was kicked off or whatever else, you would then have two devices with the same IP address causing a conflict and otherwise getting into a fight.
And for the Pi-hole in particular, the circumstance I could think of that sort of thing happening is basically in a unscheduled shutdown. So a power outage or something like that. The whole system goes down, and then everything all comes back up at once. If they submitted, DHCP requests at the same time, then someone could be assigned that IP address. You know. Okay. Yes. So the web admin interface is what we're going to be using to interact with this. So we're using SSH just to get things set up, but that's not actually what we're going to be using to interface with this. So you do want to install the web admin interface, unless like you're like really paranoid. Same thing with the Lightpad stuff. So logging queries. If you are concerned about privacy and you're concerned that someone might gain access to your Pi-hole, then you might want to turn that off.
Also, if you're like a creepy person and you want to watch what other people on the network are looking at, then that's also something you could do. This is a potential security or privacy issue.
Oh yeah.
Let's say that this is like a
if you're in a
parent that's like maybe a little like too invested in like monitoring their kids, and they want to watch like everything that goes over the network. This is a sketchy thing they could do, and I don't necessarily like it.
It doesn't. Okay, so to clarify that point, you'll be able to tell which website each device goes to, but you will not be able to tell what web page on that website.
Yeah, but I mean,
yes,
it's metadata that tells you where everyone has been.
So if it's just you and like you're fine with that, that's one thing. But yes.
Just be aware if somebody else is like, hey, can I put a Pi-hole in the network? And you're like, yeah, sure, I guess. And you're not using a VPN. You're basically giving them permission to see all the websites you go to if they check this box.
Well, also, I'll mention that now while I thought about it. But with a VPN, if you're wanting to use the Pi-hole to block ads and sinkhole domains, then you need to go into your VPN and basically turn off any settings related to DNS. Because several VPNs, such as PIA, will route DNS queries through their VPN.
They're designed. It's not a flaw. It's designed to. It's because if you don't do that, then it
no.
I'm
not saying
let some other device like know every website you're going to.
Right.
So like this is just like one of those things to think about. It's like if you have one of these devices on your network and it's set to log that stuff, then you are creating a log of where everyone on the whole network has been. So that's good if you are obsessed with control of your network. But if you have some weird person who's obsessed with control of your network and they're using it to watch you, then just be aware that they can see that stuff.
Yeah.
Of course, a VPN completely bypasses this, provided it's not leaking DNS stuff. So if you have someone who's maybe running a Pi-hole in your network and they just seem to know where you've been all the time, you can shut that stuff down by using a VPN and making sure that it's routing DNS requests through the VPN.
Yeah, just remember that's the trade-off you're making there, is if you want it going through the Pi-hole, as you can see on the screen, you can put in an anonymous mode where it's going to do a lot less that sort of thing. It will make it a little more difficult to troubleshoot any problems, as we'll see later on. But if you do it through the VPN, then you'll lose all benefits of having the Pi-hole on that particular device.
Yeah, this is like kind of doubling as a surveillance tool.
Yes. Okay. So now we've gone through that menu. It's going to take a second. And then in a second, it should throw us a password to access the admin panel after it configures everything. Oh, no.
Wow.
Okay.
That was beautiful.
This beautiful rainbow that y'all just saw. But what else? Oh, yeah, so about troubleshooting. And the reason I like to default towards all the logging is because a lot of these blacklists you'll get do work great, but then they also are a little overzealous. And so you'll go to a website or you'll have something stop working. Like, for an example, I did one, and then the Xbox achievements on my roommate's Xbox stopped working, right? So there are weird things like that. And if you can't go into logs and be like, okay, what did it block? Oh, hey, okay, let me unblock that. And then that'll start working for them again. It can be a little tedious.
I just feel like this is a conversation you need to have with anybody who's on the network.
Oh,
like, this will ruin Christmas presents. This, like, could get someone,
it wouldn't ruin a Christmas. Well, I mean,
I'm sorry, if I go to Dyson.com, what do you... And, like, you've been asking about, like, you know, a new air filter. This is going to ruin Christmas presents. This also could get someone, like, beat up. Like, if someone's, like, looking at a dating site when they shouldn't be. Or, or, like, doing something... So just... This should be an opt-in thing, in my opinion. If you are going to be logging stuff on the network, you should let people on the network know that you're going to be able to see the websites, not the contents, but the websites they're going to. And if it's like weird adult sites that they don't want you to know about
Yeah.
or whatever else. Somebody could feel extremely violated. I know that like a layperson would probably feel like very
Right.
violated to know that you are looking over their shoulder, because that's exactly how they would see it.
Yeah.
So just please, if you're going to install this on your network, just make sure that you have that conversation with
Mhm.
people. And if someone has installed this on your network without having that conversation, maybe it's time to ask whether or not the logging is enabled.
Well, so to that point, also to clarify, when we do this, once it's finished installing, it won't work on any device on the network. What you have to do is, by default, it's a more tedious process, but you would go to each individual device and on that device's settings say, hey, I want you to use this as your DNS server. What I usually favor is if you do have everyone on board, then you can go to the router and you can say, hey, router, use this as your default DNS provider. Because usually
that's what I'm assuming.
Yeah.
In the circumstance. Somebody who wanted to intercept or scrape all the web requests going through their entire network would go to the router, change the DNS settings over to the pie hole, and then boom, everything's routed straight through, and nobody would notice the difference.
Yeah. There's also you need to switch over the DHCP server, which we'll get into later, to really know more about which device is going. Otherwise, you kind of just get like, okay, well, these websites are being visited on the network.
Yeah, but if it's two people, that's not...
Right.
It's a very simple process of elimination.
Yeah.
I'm just saying this is a potential for abuse, and this is a potential for people to be able to look at stuff that other people think that they can't see.
Yeah, and there, like I said, there's solutions. If you want to use this and your roommate doesn't, like, you don't have to force it on the router. You can always just use it personally on your devices, because it's a marvelous thing. Like, for example, I know like Spotify, right? Spotify has ads in there, and this is able of blocking them, right?
But of course, like if Spotify happened to be a partner of ours, we would never say that you should do that because
that is true.
It's just this weird glitch we can't seem to fix.
There are various examples of places that you would not normally be able to block requests, that you're able to block those requests. So like, if your phone became compromised, it got hacked, or a rat got put on it or something like that, it could be very useful in those situations.
A much better and less litigious example.
Yeah. Or like I already said earlier, smart TVs are another good example. Usually typically hard to kind of see what's going on under the hood with them.
So if there was a smart TV that like updated itself and was doing some malicious stuff or got compromised as part of a botnet, you would never really know. Otherwise.
So it tried to set up IPv6, but the router we're currently running doesn't have that configured. So
shoot it.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
But the most important thing before you click OK on this, down here at the bottom, you need to... I write it down and then copy it. But that's going to be your password for the login page, and then we're going to change that.
How is that generated?
I'm assuming it's all randomly.
But okay.
I don't know I don't know what random process they're using, but that's why we're instantly changing it.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
I know it's not like static, but I also don't like the fact that it didn't like ask for some entropy at some point.
Yeah, that's true. So a couple things we can change is that password now. So if we pi hole and then tac A and tac P, that should enter a new password. So
blank for no password. Why is that an option?
Okay.
Try to remember this one.
Yeah, no, I see. Yeah. Okay, and then the other thing you want to do is you want to change the password for the Raspberry Pi itself. So you just change the Pi hole password for the admin server. But so password with a WD, and that'll...
Password.
Hi. Oh, wait. So the current password is Raspberry. And then my new password. Normally, I like setting the password for the Pi hole and the Pi it's residing on as the same. So technically, that's slightly a security breach, but it just makes working with it a lot easier because that's just what you're going to remember. So now we Also, while you're in the SSH, before we leave, the other thing I'd like to change is basically the host name. So that way on when you're looking at your network, it's more readily apparent. Because most of us have multiple Raspberry Pi projects. So when you see 5 different Raspberry Pis,
Yeah, it's not clear.
It's a little confusing which one's which.
Yeah.
So sudo nano, and then we're going to go to etc, and then host name. And then that's where we can just change this. I'm boring. I'll just use Pi-hole. And then Control X. Wait. Command
X.
Control X. Yeah.
Yeah. Y.
Yeah. There we go. And then we're going to do the same thing with the hosts file. Let's see. And then it's just this bottom line that we need to change here. Yeah, it's always fun going back and forth between Macs and Windows on a daily basis.
Yeah, yeah, it's like going between like a Linux computer, Mac OS is like not that jarring, but between like Windows and Mac OS is quite jarring.
Yeah, but at this point we're done with SSH. So now we can go to the admin page, which should be that address we wrote down earlier. So in this case, 192.168.0.100. Generally, it's going to be something like that. Yes. A very typical one is 192.168.1 dot something another, or 10.0.0 dot something another. So there is a default panel. This is like the default panel that anyone could go to and see. But to actually mess around with the settings, that's where we log in. And this should be updated to the new password I set. Yes, cool. We've already blocked 5 queries. So I don't know what's tracking what. Hey, maybe it might be your computer. You're going to websites.
I keep going to websites just to see if there are any on the
But that shouldn't be the case. It should only be from the Pi-hole itself right now. So the next thing we're going to need to do is we're going to need to go jump over to our router, and normally that's going to be 192.168.1.1, or in our case, .0.1. And you're going to look for something that is like DHCP settings. And you see down here, primary and secondary DNS. If you had 2 Raspberry Pis, some people are crazy enough to go ahead and set up 2 Pi-holes. So that way you have redundancy. Great way, especially if you're doing this on a larger, more enterprise scale. So you have like a small business or something that you're doing this at. Then that would be a good idea to do redundancy. But in our case, we're just going to put in the IP address of the Raspberry Pi.
And to be clear, this is the stage at which you are rerouting all traffic that's going through the router.
Correct.
And you would probably want to tell your roommates or anybody else who is going along for the ride.
Yes. And then, so the secondary, you need to leave that blank unless you do have a secondary Raspberry Pi, or else it'll basically just hand out queries to both of those. It's not like the secondary is, okay, I only use this in the case of a failure of the primary. It just issues to the primary and secondary equally. So that's an important thing to remember. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and refresh this just in case. But yeah, you can see the domains on our block list are already 85,000 by default. And the majority of those are ads. Some of that will also be known malicious domains, phishing domains, stuff like that. So one of the first things I like to do is go into the settings. And then this is where we can go over to DNS. And here's where we can, again, reselect like the upstream DNS providers. So like Cloudflare is what I selected during the setup. But if I wanted to mix and match those, maybe I needed IPv6 DNS queries, and only certain ones offer that. I can always change that here. Also, this is where I could change things like what interface it's using. So if I did want to use Wi-Fi for some weird reason, I could change it there. But this is where you can start beefing up your DNS security. So you can use things like DNSSEC. I don't really know all the complicated details about it, but I do know it is one of those things that you should do, and it helps prevent the DNS poisoning type attack.
Yes, it is good, and it basically makes local DNS spoofing impossible, but it also sends all the websites you're going to directly to a company. So that's the trade-off you get with it.
Yeah, so maybe you're going to give up a little bit of privacy by doing that.
Yeah, you just keep in mind that, like, DNSSEC and, some of the, whatever the other standards I'm blocking on it right now, like, they are a little bit controversial because you're basically picking someone to send all your DNS requests to, and they're encrypted, so it means that somebody on your local network can't start rerouting them. But, you know, it just means you really have to trust the end provider the same way as when you're working with a VPN.
Yeah. As Kody was talking about, like, these trade-offs in privacy and, like, kind of stair-stepping our way up. So right now we just replaced the DNS server on the router. But we can only, like, see the IP addresses of the devices that do the DNS requests. So there is, like, conditional forwarding.
DNS over HTTPS. That's what I could remember.
We will.
It was driving me crazy.
I'm going to try to set that up later. We might run out of time. So if we have to do that in a separate live stream, I will. But I will at least show people how to do that real quick. But conditional forwarding would give you an extra step of information. So I'm just going to save DNSSEC. Okay. But so what I can go up here and go to DHCP. Now, this is where I would basically make the router stop acting as the router and instead have the Pi-hole act as the DHCP server, the server which issues IP addresses to devices on the network. And what this allows it to do is have a lot more information on what devices are out there and what they're doing and what their host name is, etc.
Yeah, so if you were, like, seeing a malicious domain popping up and you really wanted to track it down, this is the next step you could take.
Right, yeah. Well, yeah.
Because maybe it's like your smart TV that's been compromised, and, like, otherwise it would be difficult to distinguish the traffic.
Yeah,
especially if different devices were like separating themselves and reconnecting, whatever, and it was hard to track down, like, who was what IP address at a certain time.
Basically, troubleshooting is the main reason I would do this. Like I said, that example of, like, you know, friends, Xbox isn't working right. You need to be able to see, okay, this is the Xbox queries. Why are some of them being blocked? And then I can whitelist some of those. So what you would need to do is you need to go over to your router and you need to look at the IP range that they're being assigned to. And then you would just need to copy that information over to the Pi-hole. So, you know, here in these fields. And then you would need to disable the router's DHCP server first. And then only once it's disabled, then you can enable the one on the Pi-hole and then do that. I'm not going to do that right now because it would mess with our network, because basically both devices would need to restart. But yeah, and then you can do, you know, further DHCP settings. You mentioned about DNS over HTTPS, and that is one of the things I love about the Pi-hole is, and Cloudflare in particular, Cloudflare, but the process is called Cloudflared. So if you go to the Pi-hole docs, I don't think we really have time to do this right now.
Yeah, just referencing.
But yeah, so you would scroll down here to ARM, and you're basically
That's tiny. Yeah, cool.
So you're going to scroll down here, and you're going to copy these commands, and then you're going to need to go into your SSH connection again, and you're going to run those. And then once you run those, you need to do this configuration stuff. There's the automatic way down here, which is usually what I do. And basically that'll set it up so that all of your DNS queries from the Raspberry Pi out to the greater internet are protected with HTTPS.
But I could still, on the local network, perhaps redirect them.
I'm not 100% sure, but I do believe that would be the case on the local network.
At least it hides it from your internet service provider, so they can't sell that information to someone else.
Right. And if you wanted to do the full thing, that's where you would need to go and take Cloudflared and install it on the local device. But it's obviously not everyone's going to be capable of doing that, and that's annoying with doing your smartphone and things like that. So that's where it'd be much easier to just do it on the Pi hole and then have it do it for the entire network. Kind of flying on here, just because I ran out of time. Some of my favorite sources for block lists. There's firebog.net. Then there's also the blocklist.site. They have a GitHub repo, which is here. One thing I really like about them is they break up the block list by types of things, so that you can be a lot more specific about the types of things you want to block. Because the last thing you want is someone barging into your room late at night demanding to know why a certain website is not working as it used to. So if you want to avoid those sorts of situations, what I recommend is make a list of all the things you want to block, and then start with what you consider the safest of those, and block those, and then wait 3 or 4 days. If there's no problems, do the next thing. So that way, when something does happen, you know exactly which list to turn off again, and then you know what you're looking for. And that helps with troubleshooting a lot. Because, ads, that's going to work great. But maybe if your friend's into crypto and their favorite crypto site is also, has like a crypto miner thing running.
And they can't find any of their updates about where Bigfoot is and whether or not he's been caught, then these cryptozoologists are going to go crazy.
Yeah, and TikTok. I don't mind. Let's shut off TikTok. And then Kody's like, why TikTok?
Yeah, use
so that's where you got to be careful.
Yep.
But yeah, so there's also Zelester. That's another site. This one's not as organized by like category, but it's a good one. And then also, surprisingly, Wikipedia has a comparison of DNS blacklists that you can really get into, and they have a ton of different blacklists here that you can really get into. So what you need to do is, whenever you find, where is it? Okay, so like, say we wanted to block Facebook, right? I think we should be able to just copy this URL, and then if we go over to here, is it blacklist? So they use a confusing term. They use like blacklist and block list differently. So it is slightly confusing which one is supposed to be which. I think whitelist. So whitelist is where you would say, okay, hey, I want this one actually to render out.
Right.
Yeah. Let's go tools.
There are a lot of
options.
options.
Yeah, no, that's yes. I think I'm gonna side with blacklist. Oh, ads list, I think. Yeah. So they moved this. Okay. I think this is how that's gonna work. So if I do that, yes. Okay. So it's now ad list and group management is where I think you're gonna enable those, and then so once you add that, it should appear down here. So what was that? It was like GitHub, Facebook. And then, so then I would be able to go and I can just toggle that list on and off. And again, that's really helpful for diagnosing the kinds of problems. And that's why I like the block list site, because it allows you to say, okay, hey, I want to block TikTok, Facebook. And then someone's like, oh, hey, this web page isn't loading because it only does Facebook login. And you're like, oh, okay, well, now I got to go disable the Facebook thing. Right. So it just really helps with troubleshooting.
So when does this kick in? Or at what point is it, does it start working? Do you need to restart it? Or like, for example, I just loaded.
It should be working. Oh, wait, no, I put primary DNS as 1. It's 100. That might be part of
I'm amazed that anything was loading at all.
Yeah, that is. Remember DNS caching. DNS caching can get you sometimes.
Yep.
So yeah, but we are quickly running out of time. What are some of the other features that I wanted to show?
Wow, I'm just amazed that Instagram.com bought Finstagram.com just in case you mess up.
Nice.
That's very smart.
If you do want a written guide, if I was a little long-winded today, do check out my Nullbyte article on this, how to lock down your DNS with a Pi-hole. But yeah, so SSH, we covered all that. We covered VPNs. That's kind of what that looks like if you want to disable it on a VPN.
Yeah, one thing I'll circle back to also is like, you need to have a conversation with anybody on the network that's going to be affected by this and let them know that it's going to be caching the websites they go to and you could be able to see them. And two, you really need to change the credentials on this one because that being said, you're kind of setting up a device that can just spy on you. So if you don't do things like changing the SSH password and the Pi-hole password, both, not just one of them, then you are potentially setting yourself up to have somebody else be able to see every weird website you go to.
Well, so again, they wouldn't be able to see that level of information, and it generates that random password.
If it's your network.
Yeah.
I mean,
they
you're
could
assuming like obscurity
it.
by a. Well, no, I'm just saying if. You're saying that you wouldn't be able to like trace it down to the individual device, but if it's like two people on one network, it's like, all right, well, if it's not mine, it's yours.
Well, I guess yeah. So the admin would be able to do that, but the other person on the network wouldn't be able to do that.
Right. I'm saying if they don't change the password of the Pi-hole, and then anyone can log into the Pi-hole and change settings, then they can just kick it up to whatever the maximum logging is. And assuming that the router's been set up to redirect the DNS request, then you have a logging device that somebody else can access and change.
Yeah, they would still need I think they would still need the Pi-hole admin password even once they've logged into the Raspberry Pi to...
No, I'm just saying you need only the Pi-hole admin password because the web interface is available to everybody on the network.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, that's been the Pi-hole. Sorry, the setup took a little longer than I anticipated.
No, I think this was great. I mean, especially for beginners who are getting started with this is a powerful project to do with the Raspberry Pi. A lot of our friends use this project. I know our LA studio has a Pi-hole running. So a lot of people actually do this. But as I like to point out, this is powerful stuff. And depending on the way it's set up, it can really start digging into the same information that normally your internet service provider would get. So your level of creep factor is just like, can my roommate see the weird stuff I'm doing? Or can Comcast see it and then sell it to Google and then send me a bunch of weird,
set up for like a month.
Weird ads about that thing that I visited that I thought no one knew about. It's where you're kind of kicking the can with privacy. Because let's say that you're like, oh, I trust Cloudflare to see all my weird stuff. Then cool, like turn on, DNS over HTTPS and whatever. Or maybe you want Google to know all that weird stuff you're into. At some point, you just need to realize that whoever's the administrator, be it the person who runs the Pi-hole on your network or be the person on your internet service provider, is going to be able to see some information. And it's up to you to decide how much information you're going to reveal and where you're going to let that information go.
Okay, I'm actually going to go back to my screen real quick.
Do it.
In the Pi-hole docs, what he was saying, so Pi-hole as an all-round DNS solution. We can do another live stream on this if y'all want us to go into all the more details and like setting this stuff up. But that's how it would set up as a recursive DNS server. So that means you don't need to trust anyone outside of your house.
Yeah, and if you don't mind it loading for a loading for a long time, this thing will go out on the internet and find out for itself where it is, and it will keep those logs to itself.
Honestly, that's one of the reasons I say the more people you have in your house, the better it is as a recursive server, because then y'all go to similar websites and then it'll be cached. So there's directions on here how to set that up. There's also things you can do, such as using the Pi-hole with a VPN, as well as doing DNS request over Tor.
Sketchy. I love it.
So if y'all want to know more about that, we will do that on a future live stream.
Captures forever.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Well, I don't think the DNS would do that.
No, the Tor will do that.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so thank you guys for joining us today. This has been a really good use of a Raspberry Pi to improve your privacy, security, and also get some more control over the ads that are playing on your computer and tracking you. So if you want to check it out, you can check out the article that Michael just showed off, and just replay this anytime you want.
Okay.
We also want to give a great shout out to our sometimes host Killian, who is on the Varonis brand channel doing the threat update. Varonis has a lot of other great content out there, so if you want to check it out, then make sure to check out the brand channel to find out what real companies are up against in terms of malware and threats. Cool. All right, that's it. We'll talk to you guys next time. Bye.